a dive just now with quite a bit of current and sloshing around, and I looked at my camera from the back and there's f***ing water inside. Just a little bit, but I immediately called the dive and came up to the dive boat, to the dinghy. I'm just trying to make sure it doesn't hit the camera, but so many issues the past 2 days with these cameras. Let's hope that water didn't get inside the camera.
But my housing flooding was far from the first technical difficulty of this trip. Back in Isabela, Blue's lens bag came loose from the bike and smashed into the road.
It shattered my lens.
Nuh-uh.
I can hear it. God damn it.
But once we removed the lens cap, we could see it was only the filter that had shattered, and luckily the lens was okay.
Holy I was like really gonna start crying there.
We're having a few technical difficulties on this trip. The first thing that I noticed was I was backing up our hard drives the other day, and the way we label it is by day, and day 3 seemed like it was a really small folder. So I looked in it and looked in the backup, and there's a bunch of files that just say 0 bytes. So I don't know how that happened, but it sucks, because losing footage sucks. It's a whole day of work that's gone. On top of that, our gimbal is having issues, and we're struggling to keep our charging station from toppling over with the ocean swells. And then yesterday I was putting my dive housing together out here, and I took my lens off, put the camera in the housing, was putting my lens back on, and like my hand slipped and the lens bounced from the table and then hit the ground. And like really expensive brand new lens for my A7S3. I looked at it, everything looked awesome, no cracks, nothing sounding loose. Plug it into my camera and it just shows nothing. It just shows like a white screen. The camera's not recognizing that there's a lens there. So that lens is out for the rest of this trip. Stuff happens. You can only do so much.
Okay. All right, let's get on.
And back to the most recent issue, the flooded housing. Most dive housings have a vacuum system that seals them completely. The interesting thing is that this housing was still under vacuum pressure and somehow managed to let water in. I'm just gonna check the battery compartment to see if any water got in there. That's like the most important. It looks dry, huh?
It looks totally dry.
Okay, complete crisis averted. The last step now, I've cleaned the housing out and I'm ready to test. It's vacuumed up, so you put a vacuum seal so the O-rings really lock onto each other. We're gonna take it out in the dinghy, attach a bunch of weights to it while it's empty, drop it down, maybe like 20 feet, 30 feet, and see what happens. We're good. No water.
It made us feel a bit better that the housing had survived this test plunge, but we would have to wait and see what happened on the rest of our dives. When we got home, we sent the housing into Icolite, where they tested it and informed us that it was user error, and that the main O-ring looked like it had been damaged. In all fairness, I've put hundreds of dives on my Icolite housing without issue, so I will personally continue to use this brand. But in the moment, all we could do was hope for the best and enjoy the rest of our trip in the Galapagos. And while our visit at Wolf was over, it was time to move on to the next island, where we had an even bigger surprise waiting for us. After covering 25 miles, we found Darwin, the northernmost and quite possibly most famous island of the Galapagos archipelago. With no dry landing sites, its main attraction is actually Darwin's Arch, which marks the spot of a world-class dive site, known especially well for schooling hammerheads. Little did we know we would be some of the last people to lay eyes on Darwin's Arch. About a month after this clip was taken, we awoke to a startling headline.
Darwin's Arch, a famous rock formation off the Galapagos Islands, has collapsed due to erosion. Images distributed by Ecuadorian officials show only the 2 stone supporting columns remain.
Esperamos y obviamente a todos los galapagueños nos dio nostalgia porque es algo con lo cual estamos familiarizados desde niños y ahora saber que ha cambiado es como una especie de shock, digamos.
The captain of Tiburon went out of his way to attempt getting government clearance for us to fly the drone here, but unfortunately, we were denied. So the next morning, we went out to unknowingly capture what would be some of the last images ever to be taken of Darwin's Arch.
And then to the arch. Whoa, the current's ripping.
After millions of years, the life of this legendary 42-meter arch came to an end in the exact way it was created, through natural erosion. We're still a bit in shock that in the grand scheme of time, we got to see it in some of its last moments on Earth.
We got a private tour of the Darwin Arch, bro.
Yeah. I think they take everyone on a little tour later after the third dive.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
But it's nice that we get to be in the boat and be like, go here, further, closer. So obviously the boat looks awesome with the arch in the foreground, in the background, and I need some fried bananas in my life.
Stomping the tunes.
Hammerhead!
Okay, we got the Hammerhead! Let's go see you.
Yes, the best.
We made our way to this plateau and crossed our fingers that the Hammerheads would appear. We didn't have any luck on our first dive, but eventually our patience was rewarded. The ancestors of these sharks can be traced back 20 million years. In that time, their hammerheads have evolved into a cephalofoil shape, which is believed to make them exceptional hunters in the shark world. The odd shape provides more surface area for the pores that make up their sixth sense, electroreception. Any movement by their prey means the change in charge of sodium and chlorine ions in the salt water is instantly detected by the shark and leads them straight to their next meal. Despite being such a highly evolved predator, these hammerheads showed no interest in us and decided to keep a safe distance from us aliens blowing bubbles underwater. According to the International Shark Attack File, there have been only 16 attacks and 0 deaths from hammerheads to humans since the year 1900. They're even known to be a bit shy, which made our sighting of them all the more special.
So, tell me about the hammerhead experience.
I don't know, you see that kind of experience or shot in videos so much on YouTube or online, and then when you're underwater and you see hammerheads like 20 feet from you, and I don't know, there was at least 80 is what our guide said. He said, I stopped counting at 80. So, and they're just like constantly swimming past. They have bite marks on them. They're just so graceful and huge too. There was some really big ones in there that must have been 10 foot long or something like that. And yeah, they hung around for like 20 minutes. So we just got to sit and enjoy. The current was ripping, so we're trying to hold on to the rocks, and like the cameras were flying everywhere, but overall it was such a cool experience.
It was incredible, and it was really cool too. You could see some of the females had the wounds on their necks because it's breeding season. So that's actually how the males breed with them. They like go and clamp onto them and fight them, and then they get it on. Schooling hammerheads, check.
Okay, out of all the things we've been spoiled with on this liveaboard, this has to be my favorite. After living on a sailboat for so long, not having a big shower with unlimited water. Look at that. On a rating system, I would say this shower gets a 10 out of 10. But unlimited showers weren't the only way to warm up on the Tiburon Explorer.
Vamos, vamos, vamos. Vamos.
And speaking of being spoiled, the food on board was also a 10 out of 10. The two geniuses in the background.
Right?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah, thank you guys. Awesome.
From omelets every morning to fresh, delicious lunches and dinners, it was the perfect mix to keep you energized for the next dive. Which just so happened to be a night dive.
Alright, Paolo, what's the plan?
The plan, we go into a beautiful cave where we have a chance to enjoy with sea lions if you're lucky, and race, turtles. It's gonna be a very relaxed dive compared with the previous dive we had. Sorry?
This is 4 of the
Dive
day.
number 4. Dive number 4, the last one of the day. Probably is gonna be the most beautiful dive. A beautiful cave.
What do you think for a night dive?
I'm excited. I didn't really know we were gonna do any night dives, so everything comes out at night.
But this was no average cave. We would dive into the left entrance to explore the smaller side, then swim through a tunnel to the larger side, before exiting back out the right side of the cave. And of course, there was a decent amount of swell at the entrance. But we finally made our way in, and were instantly rewarded with some sea lions.
Tucked in every corner of the cave are huge moray eels, who actually have 2 sets of jaws. The inner set is deep in the throat and comes out to grab prey and pull it down into the stomach. Apart from all the sea life we encountered in this cave, the size and number of swim-throughs were something I had never seen before. As we swam from cavern to cavern, I couldn't help but imagine what it would be like to get lost back here. But of course, our guides let us out.
Oh my god. That was awesome.
Back on the boat. This amazing night time, Milky Way in the sky. So cool. We walked up to this guy. He's like,
Hey, nice shirt, man.
He's like, alcohol, alcohol, alcohol.
Para mí? Gracias.
In the next episode, we travel to Isabella for our final dive and encounter our first massive mola mola. After leaving the Tiburon Explorer, we make one final stop on San Cristobal Island to visit an old friend and talk about conservation of the Galapagos Islands.